Hare Krishna. Welcome to another episode in the lives of the Vaishnavacharyas. My name is Chatra Atma. If you're seeing this particular recording, you're probably scratching your head, where's the chat room? How come it's not live? That's because as you're watching this recording, I'm in Vrindavan, India. We've made arrangements. I'll be gone for 4, maybe 5 weeks, and we've made arrangements to record episodes that can be shown in my absence. So you'll get used to this format, this presentation. We've been recording webcasts now for 20 weeks. And during those 20 weeks, we've spoken exclusively about the associates of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and those associates that dealt directly with his pastimes. Today, I'm going to break away from that a bit, and we're going to speak about Madhvacharya. After all, the name of this webcast series is Lives of the Vaishnavacharyas, and Madhvacharya is very significant in our line. Our line is the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya, originating from Lord Brahma, coming through the means of Madhvacharya, and being fine-tuned and presented for us in Kali Yuga by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Madhvacharya has a very significant role in our Sampradaya and in our line of teachings. I think it's interesting to note the life of Madhvacharya in comparison, shall we say, to the rest of the world. Madhvacharya's birth is somewhere around the year 1238, 1240, like that. Not exactly accurate at those times, but that's a very clear approximation. The life of Madhvacharya is given in a book called the Madhvacharya, and it's written by Narahari Tirtha, who was the son of one of the most prominent disciples of Madhvacharya, as we'll find out later on. And so this is considered a very, very substantial and very authoritative source. When Madhvacharya appeared, the rest of the world was not in anywhere near, how we say, the elevated state. If we look at Europe during the 1200s, this is the middle, if you will, of the medieval period in Europe. King Henry VIII, the line of King Henrys, a time when people in Europe are struggling with the idea of figuring out how to bathe daily. A time in Europe at which plague is rampant. The living conditions of filth and uncleanliness are very, very prominent. There's certainly not what we would call an advanced culture. Now, Aristotle's teachings are very prominent in Europe at this time, having come up from Greece. But the elevated consciousness and lifestyle is not very strong. If we shift over to the North and South American continents, the Mayan culture is just nearing the end of its demise. Of the 5 different periods of Mayan history, at this time in the world history, we're at the final phase of Mayan history. The Mayan culture is fading in its presence. If we look to India, the prominence of Buddhism has been all but driven by the 1200s, all but driven out of India. And the teachings of Sankaracharya are very prominent. So into this world scenario, we see Madhvacharya make his appearance. His father's name was Madhyageha Bhatt. And Madhyageha Bhatt not only, an interesting scenario, they came in a line of Brahmins, but their family history is directly connected to descendants of Parashuram. So a mixed Kshatriya Brahmin caste is what we find in the life of Madhvacharya, and this will serve him well throughout his later years in life. When Madhvacharya was a child, there are quite a large number of stories that surround the very unique activities of his life. Actually, it's understood and widely accepted that Madhvacharya was an incarnation of Lord Vayu. Vayu, of course, is the wind god. The actual name is Mukhya Pran. Mukhya, of course, refers to the head, and Pran, the life airs. So the life airs of the body, of the main portion of the body, this is how Vayu manifests himself. And it's understood that Vayu came in 3 particular incarnations in this way. One as Hanuman, the associate of Ramchandra, the second as Bhimasen, the associate of the Pandavas, and the third as Madhvacharya, who appeared in this Kali Yuga as a sannyasi. So these are the three accepted incarnations of Vayu, and as an incarnation of Vayu, the activities of Madhvacharya have very many miraculous dealings in them, pastimes. It's mentioned that one time when Madhvacharya was a child, a young child, this is in the age 5-6 years old, that his father had incurred some debts, and the debt collector had come to the home to collect these debts, which his father was unable to pay. As a Brahmin, we know Brahmins are traditionally cursed by Lakshmi Devi due to the activities of Bhrigu, and as a result of that, they generally are not very wealthy. So this was the case with Madhvacharya's father, and Madhvacharya was able to take some tamarind seeds, and by the strength of his own hand and the mystical potency of his abilities, squeeze these tamarind seeds into gold coins and thus pay off the debt of the father. A very amazing pastime. It mentions that when he was a young child, there was a snake demon that lived near their home. The snake demon's name was Maniman, and was causing quite a disturbance. And at a very young age, here again 5, 6, 7 years old, Madhvacharya went there and with just the toe of his foot killed the snake and saved the villagers from the disturbances caused by the snake. His mother was always in great anxiety if she did not see him, and she would call for him, and immediately from wherever he was, he would jump. It says he would jump like the wind, understandably like the wind, as he is Vayu, and he would jump and he would be right there. At this young age, he developed a great taste for renunciation, and at the age of 8 years old, he requested his father to allow him to take sannyas. This reminds me of one interesting story, how this sannyas at a young age is not so foreign in the line of Madhva. There was one Vaishnava that attended the Mayapur festivities. I believe it was the installation of the Panchatattva. And this was the head of the Madhva Sampradaya from South India. And he came, and of course he's a sannyasi, and he came with his danda, very tiny little short danda, almost like a little walking stick. And so the devotees inquired from him, excuse me, but our understanding is that a danda is made the height of the person carrying it. He said, yes, this was my height when I accepted sannyas. He was about 10, 12 years old. At that time, it was a short danda. So now, of course, he was a grown man and kept the same danda. So in this way, Madhvacharya desired at the age of 8 years old to take sannyas, and his father was very reluctant. No, this is not possible. But he continued on in this type of thinking. It mentions in his education that he had no need to learn the alphabet. It was just there. There was no need for him to study. And all of the studying he performed, anything, he just immediately understood it. Vastly learned in his knowledge. Particularly at that time, the teachings of Sankaracharya's Advaita Vedanta philosophy were very prominent. As we know from the chronological philosophical presentation in history at that time, that Lord Buddha had come to dissuade all the bogus Vedanta followers who were sacrificing animals in the name of Vedic rituals. And he give up the Vedas, just follow me and practice ahimsa. So after persuading everyone and Buddhism becoming very prominent, then Sankaracharya made his incarnation of Lord Shiva, for the purpose of taking people away from Buddhism and bringing them back to the path of the Vedas properly, but in an impersonal way, in gradual stepping. And then Madhvacharya came to smash the ideas of Sankaracharya. Sankaracharya's impersonalistic Advaita Vedanta philosophy was smashed by Madhvacharya. This was his very strong difference there. His compelling force in pursuing this became the life's goal that he had. At any rate, so he was placed into the ashram of Achyuta Prakesh at that time. And as I say, he mastered everything very, very quickly. And in mastering all of this, began to challenge the ideas that Achyuta Prakesh presented. Well, at the age of 12, Achyuta Prakesh could understand his divine character and gave him his sannyas. 12 years old, he took sannyas. I don't know of many 12-year-old boys that I could consider capable or ready for taking sannyas, but of course this was it. Now, at the time, he was known as Punapragyatirtha. we will find that Madhva had several names. At his birth name was Vasudeva. This was the name that his parents addressed him by. When he went into the ashram of Achyuta Prakash, he took sannyas and was given the name Ananda Tirtha. That was his sannyas name. But he was called Purnapragya Tirtha by his classmates and teacher, because Purnapragya indicates one who's very expert in knowledge. So Purnapragya Tirtha took the sannyas name of Ananta Tirtha. And this became Ananta Tirtha, how he would commonly be referred to in these circles. Madhvacharya is the name he came to later be known as. So in this way, he began to challenge his guru, his teacher at that time, who, while not exactly accepting the points by any means, eventually turned the mat over to him, turned the school over to Madhvacharya. And at this time, he began to very, very expertly study all the different points of Shastra and Scripture and Shankaracharya's philosophy and the dual Vedanta, and just, breaking everything apart, establishing this very well. And he became the authority at that time. In due course of time, he began to travel all over South India. He made his headquarters just near Udupi. I didn't mention he was born just 8 miles from the Udupi temple, from this region in Udupi. And at this time, Udupi was very, very famous as a holy site in India already. So he established his ashram there and began to travel quite extensively. And in this traveling, he went to Kanyakumari, all the way south to the tip of India, into all the different areas of South India. Buddhists, Jains, atheists. He smashed everyone. This was his technique, to very astounding. It mentions he had a very sonoric, which means a very loud and resonating voice. And that he would be able to very strongly defeat any argument that was brought before him. And numerous people came and presented arguments to him, and he was able to completely smash them. Now, he was requested that he should write a commentary on Vedanta by, Achyuta Prakash, that if you disagree so strongly with our teachings, this is the line we're coming in, then you write your own presentation of Vedanta. So he decided, yes, I would like to do this, but before doing this, I want to get the blessings of the author of Vedanta. So with this idea in mind, Madhvacharya decided to take a tour to North India, to Badrinath. Badrinath is located, you go to Rishikesh, and from Rishikesh you go some 10 hours by vehicle, maybe a couple of 3 weeks by hiking, up into the Himalaya mountains to the Badrinath ashram. This is the residence of Lord Badrinath. And then from there, another day's journey or so into the Himalayas is the residence of Vedavyas. It's understood that Vedavyas at that time was still living on the planet, but just not visible to the mortal eyes. So after this long journey from South India all the way up to Rishikesh, and from Rishikesh up into Badrinath like this, Madhvacharya continued. Now for Madhvacharya this was no problem, because Madhvacharya was in excellent condition. He was a very sports-minded person. He was very, very fond. When he was growing up, he wouldn't study books. Everything was just right there and easily picked up by him. He would spend all of his time wrestling and swimming. He was an expert swimmer, as we'll see later, and he was very expert in wrestling. And his third favorite activity was mountain climbing. And this, of course, served him very well when he came into the Himalayas, because it's not like now there's 2-lane roads with blacktop all the way up there. You had to actually hike into the Himalayas. So this served him very well at that time. So at that time he came to the residence of Vedavyas, and sure enough, Vedavyas was there. And he offered his obeisances and prostrated himself before Vedavyas and begged him, please, I want to write commentaries on the Vedantas, but I want your blessings first. So Vyasadeva said, have you written anything yet? He said, I have a commentary on mind, I have not put to script, on the Bhagavad Gita. He said, please present that to me. So Madhvacharya presented his commentary on Bhagavad Gita. And Vyasadeva heard it and was very, very satisfied by it. Very, very happy to hear this commentary. To the point that he blessed him, yes, now I can see from this, you can do what needs to be done. Please write the other commentaries you want. And as a matter of fact, I have a present for you. And he gave him 1 Shalagram Shila. That Shalagram Shila was the Astumurti Shalagram. 8 different forms of the Lord in 1 Shila. Very, very beautiful type of Shila. I've never seen, I've only read about it. But so in this way, receiving the blessings of Vedavyas, receiving the approval for his commentary, and receiving the Shalagam Shila, he decided to return. Now, all of these pastimes that we hear, they're written down by one companion named Satyatirtha. Satyatirtha was a sannyas associate of Madhvacharya, his disciple that traveled with him when he went to North India and when he did all these travels in South India. As we've mentioned in other classes, different devotees would write. We were speaking just last week that the devotees that wrote the Chaitanya Leela collected the notes from the personal associates. Krishnadas Kaviraj collected the notes from Swarup Damodar. Vedavyas collected notes from his mother, who witnessed most of the pastimes of the Lord in Navadvip, and Lochandas Thakur collected the notes from Murari Gupta. So in this way, the notes of Satyatirtha were collected, and these became the foundation for the Madhva Vijay. So these were all written down. So in this way, leaving Badrinath, Madhvacharya continued on his journey, and on his way back down, he went through Bihar, through Bengal, through Orissa, all the different states, and in every place he went, he debated and defeated all the atheistic and non-personalist, non-theist philosophers of the Vedas and of any other school of teaching. So at one point, Madhvacharya was traveling and he reached a place on the Godavari River. And at this point, he met two very, very prominent scholars. Their names were Swami Shastri and Shobhana Bhatt. Shobhana Bhatt and Swami Shastri were very knowledgeable, very expert, and they debated with Madhvacharya. At this time in Indian history, more so than we see nowadays, this is the late 1200s, just before the turn of the century into the 1300s, debate was very prominent. This was the means of discussion and conquest, and like this was the entertainment of the day, so to speak. So in this way, these two personalities, very well known for their expertise in their teachings, Swami Shastri and Shobhana Bhatt, they debated with him, and he defeated them very soundly. And they very happily became his disciples. He initiated them as Padmanabh Tirtha and Narahari Tirtha. Padmanabh Tirtha and Narahari Tirtha became the two most prominent sannyas disciples of Madhvacharya, and went with him and assisted him in all of his teachings and in all of his preaching and traveling and everything. It was very, very wonderful. So Padmanabh Tirtha, he, of course, under the direction of Madhvacharya, wrote many commentaries on Madhva's different works, including a commentary on Madhva's Brahma Sutra Bhyasya. He was the, how shall we say, the, what's the word I'm looking for, the author, the person that kept all of Madhva's books recorded and commented on them in this way like that. So after converting these two personalities, Madhvacharya continued on through Andhra Pradesh and Maharashtra, and finally arriving in Karnataka, back to his town in Udupi. And when he arrived in Udupi, Achyuta Prakash had taken the school back over because Madhva had gone away. And you can imagine, if you're in South India and you're going all the way to the Himalayas at the northernmost point of North India, and then all the way back down and stopping all along the way in the back for preaching and converting and visiting all the states, this takes quite some time. So Achyuta Prakash had taken the school back over and did not accept the position of Madhvacharya. He did not accept that he should be the senior person and like that. So it was decided that they would debate. And Achyuta Prakash represented Shankar's version of Vedanta, and Madhvacharya was able to quickly and easily defeat him and convert him to the full Vaishnava philosophy in this way. So, as a result of all this debating and converting people, a new school, so to speak, of Vedanta philosophy, presented on the teachings of Madhvacharya, developed and gained wider and wider acceptance. And during this time, his scriptural knowledge, his invincible logic, and his overall charismatic personality inspired faith in many, many people and converted them to this path that he was establishing. So by this we see that the line is being quickly brought back to the original teachings of Lord Brahma, Lord Krishna, Lord Brahma, and Narada Muni, like this, and in this way back to the original understanding of what is Vedanta philosophy. So staying in Udupi. Udupi is very close to the ocean there, of course, and so staying in Udupi, it was Madhvacharya's regular activity to take bath in the ocean. So one day he was sitting on the beach and contemplating the pastimes of Lord Krishna, deep in meditation. And as he came out, he noticed that there was a ship traveling north, headed to Dwarka. And somehow or another, this ship had come onto a sandbar and was floundering there, trying to get away. So it was headed in this way, not going to be able to get free. So Madhvacharya, by indicating with his cloth this way and that, was able to direct the boatman away from this sandbar, from being lodged there permanently, and guide him through this area. So the boatman docked and came on to and wanted to thank the sadhu. And he wanted to offer some present to Madhvacharya. And Madhvacharya said, well, what do you have to give? So the boatman said, well, I have this and that and this and that. Madhvacharya said, I see you have one ballast, one big chunk of gopi chandan. Huge chunk of gopi chandan they were using to ballast the boat, to keep the boat stable like that. So he said, I will take that gopi chandan. So the boatman arranged to have it unloaded and given to him. And when Madhvacharya received the chunk of gopi chandan, it broke open, and inside was the beautiful deity that is now known as Udupi Krishna. It was Krishna as a cowherd boy with one hand on his hip and in the other hand holding a sweet. Very, very charming form like this. So everyone was very, very astonished to see the deity of Krishna hidden inside of a block of tea like that. But of course, Madhvacharya was not unaccustomed to miracles taking place in his life in this way. So at that time, he composed some very beautiful prayers to Lord Krishna. And these prayers became something that are recited regularly to the deity there. And now the deity had to be moved from the ocean side to the temple where he would be installed and worshipped. So 30 men were brought, and they could not lift this deity. Madhvacharya said, excuse me. He went over, he picked the deity of Krishna up, put him in his arm, and carried him, just like that. They installed the deity. At that installation of the Udupi Krishna deity, Madhvacharya lit one lamp and offered that lamp. The story is that to this day that same lamp is burning. That they are constantly keeping the oil and the wick and everything, and it's the same lamp that was burning at the time of Madhvacharya. This is the story that is told in the Udupi Krishna temple. So after installing the deity, Madhvacharya set down a very strict standard of rules and regulations for how to worship the deity. These became very important and foundational in the line of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's followers in the standards of deity worship. And very, very strict regimen of different rituals and ceremonies, and what the conduct, the proper behavior of the pujaris would be, how they should behave, what's accepted, what's not, very, very strict like this. He also imposed a very rigorous standard of fasting, complete fasting on Ekadasi for all the pujaris like that. So in this way he established the worship of Udupi Krishna. And then after some time he desired again to travel. He wanted to go, and travel again. And so he took another pilgrimage to North India, to the ashram of Vedavyas. It's written that, again, Satyatirtha went with him, and that Madhva at this time traveled wider and to more places than he did in his last trip to North India. During these travels, the wide knowledge of different languages that Madhvacharya had served him very well. He knew not only, of course, Hindi and Bengali and Sanskrit, of course, all the South Indian languages, but he also knew Persian. He was very well versed in these different languages. And so he, Turkish also, and he encountered many difficulties in his travels in that way, because at that time North India was being infiltrated by different conquerors from the Muslim countries, and so he ran into different situations and was able to prevent any difficulty by speaking the local languages. There was one time where they came to one part of the Ganga and they had to cross. Now the Ganga at this time was very, very moving very quickly and very wide, And there was a division naturally by the river, and a division theologically by the residents, because on one side of the river were the Hindus, and on the other side of the river were the Muslims, and they were completely in opposition to each other, and no communication between the two. So what they decided was that it would just not be permitted for any of the Hindus to come to the Muslim side of the river. And the Hindu king at that time enforced this. His name was Sultan Jalal-ud-Din Khilji. And he would not allow any of the Hindus to come. Well, Madhvacharya and his disciples, they simply wanted to cross the river and continue on their journeys to North India. So they dove into the Ganga and swam all the way across. There were no boats available because boats were not allowed because there was no passing back and forth. And this was quite some distance at the time that sometimes the Ganga can be very, very broad, very wide. And they swam all the way across, and when they got to the other side, the entire camp was arrested. Muslim constables arrested him, and they took him to the Sultan. So when he brought him before the Sultan demanded, "Who are you that you have broken this ruling?" So in perfect Persian, this is the language of Iran, in perfect Persian he spoke with and debated with the king and convinced him of his point of view. And he presented the points of devotional theism, which is, of course, greatly in opposition to the Islamic teachings. And seeing the intensity of his presentation and the saintly character of Madhvacharya, the Sultan's heart was actually softened. All right, anyway, you can continue on, but please first let me give you some gift. So, he wanted to offer him different tracts of land or great wealth. Madhvacharya, in a perfect example of true renunciation, accepted none of this. He said, all that we want is passage through your country. So in this way he continued on. So Madhvacharya's superhuman strength was complemented by his high level of intelligence and his superhuman wit, if you will. One time that strength was shown, he was traveling with his disciple, we mentioned Satyatirtha. They were going through Bengal, and a fierce Bengali tiger attacked Satyatirtha. And any of you that may have visited zoos or parks or whatever and seen these Bengali tigers, they're very large and very, very fierce. And it had attacked his associates. So Madhvacharya jumped in the middle of the two and separated them, and defeated the tiger so fiercely that the tiger put its tail between its legs like a small kitten and ran off into the distance. So he saved his associate Satyatirtha in this way. Easily was able to hold them off. It mentions that Madhvacharya was a multifaceted personality. Many, many different sides to his nature. And he lived a very long and, as I've mentioned, healthy life due to his interest in his outdoor activities. He lived to 79, almost 80 years old, which we'll cover a little bit later. It mentions that he was a natural lever who believed very strongly in physical culture. Sometimes we find that the Vaishnavas become a little weak and uninterested in maintaining their health or good vigorous nature. Sometimes even sporting activities are looked down upon. What was it? During the time of Bhaktisiddhanta, Subhash Chandra Ghosh had encouraged Bhaktisiddhanta that you are taking so many men for your mission, you should let me have some of these men for fighting for the independence of India. And Bhaktisiddhanta said, oh, you look at my men, they're all, not very strong, very weak personalities. You just don't put your eyes, he said, don't cast your glance upon them. So in this way, these sannyasis were not generally very robust like this, but this was not the nature of Madhvacharya. It mentions that the development of this physical culture, intellectual culture, very high standard of moral behavior, very high principles of spiritual culture, this was all a part of his life. This all combined into the different faceted natures of his personality and lifestyle. As we mentioned, his athletic involvement was wrestling, swimming, mountain climbing. These were all very, very helpful to him throughout his entire life. And this was, as I mentioned in the beginning, this was due in part because of his Brahminical background, his ability to pursue very widely and very strongly the intellectual presentation of the philosophy, and because of his warrior caste, having descended from Parshuram, the interest and pursuit of physical culture as well. So, the incarnation combinations in the line of Parshuram and incarnation of Vayu, of course, very, very strong personality in his incarnations is Hanuman and Bhima. Excuse me, my apologies. Hanuman and Bhima, these both manifested there. He's a very tall and strong and well-built individual. There was one time it mentions that there was a strong man that came to hear of Madhvacharya's prowess, both in not only his spiritual and intellectual nature, but his physical prowess. And he challenged him. One big strong man he was known. His name was Kandajari. And Kandajari was reputed and well known for just taking 5-10 men on at a time and defeating all of them. So he challenged Madhvacharya to a wrestling match. Madhvacharya said, well, first, let's establish your qualification to challenge me. So he put his foot out, his right foot, and put his toe firmly on the ground. Said, if you can move my toe, then I will give you the time of wrestling. So the Kandanjari came, and with all of his brute strength and all of his brawn and muscles, he could not even budge one single toe on the foot of Madhvacharya. So thoroughly was he defeated, and he surrendered and, just accepted defeat at the hands of Madhvacharya. Trivikram Pandit, one of the followers of Madhvacharya, describes the 32 different bodily characteristics that were there in the personality of Madhvacharya. There's a very nice description here Madhva Vijay gives, and I'm going to read this here. Madhvacharya shone like the moon with his gentle smile. Despite being such a very strong intellect and wit and very powerful in his presentation and speaking and very physically strong, he had a very gentle smile which could enchant people. Shone like the moon with his gentle smile, his lotus-like eyes, his golden complexion, and his words of blessing to all. He had the gait of a young lion, the feet and hands like sprouts of new grass, nails like rubies, and thighs like the trunk of an elephant, a broad chest and long muscular arms. Indeed, those who made the sacred images of the deities considered him to be the perfect model for their art. So this was the nature of Madhvacharya's appearance, that he was very attractive to everyone. So, after doing his travels throughout all of India, as we mentioned, Badrinath and the state of Orissa and Bengal, he returned again to South India, going along the coast, the western coast, Dwarka, Goa, like that, and then returning down to Udupi. And he, at that time, began to develop a very strong system of followers, and 8 prominent teachers came to be his disciples, and 8 prominent languages that he preached in as well. Not that the 8 teachers represented each of the languages, but he preached very strongly in 8 different languages throughout. And at this time he began to submerge himself into prolific literary writing. And this is when he wrote many, many of the famous commentaries. He wrote his commentary upon all 10 of the Upanishads. He wrote what's considered to be one of his most important works, the Anuvyakhana. This is a commentary on all the Upanishads. He wrote a summary of the Mahabharata at this time called the Moksha Dharma, and he began to write his commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam, which would be a great work that he did. At this time, he had established himself so strongly, and he'd become so prominent in his teachings, and had pushed forward his ideas through his writings and debate, that he was the feared and hated enemy of all the followers of Sankaracharya. You would think that here's a personality representing the Vedanta line and presenting the full conclusion, and this would be the next step to go, and everybody would accept that. I mean, we do, but we're looking at history in retrospect. But at the time, it was seen that he was challenging the Sankaracharya followers, and that therefore they had to defeat him and oppose him in their teachings. So there was one particular, what's his name? I'm looking for the name. His name was Pundaripuri. Pundaripuri was a very, very well-known Sankaracharya follower, and he had, the Sankarites at the time had complete control of all the different mutts and of all the different teachings and all, and they were not willing to give that up. There's one quote from Bhaktivinoda in his writings on this period that he says, of all the plagues of which mankind has been cursed, ecclesiastical tyranny is the worst. Bhaktivinoda was very poetic in that way. So these followers of Sankaracharya, they attacked Sripad Madhvacharya at any means they had, not only in verbal debate and in trying to besmirch his character, speak against his personality, but in more physical ways as well. So they arranged for this big Pandit, Pundaripuri, to debate with him. And he was the most expert in argument and erudition at that time amongst the Sankaracharyites. And so he sat down before Madhvacharya to debate. And the comparison made by those that observed this debate was it was just as if a schoolboy had come and presented himself before a professor to debate. So soundly was he defeated. And aching for vengeance, because he didn't accept this defeat, aching for vengeance, he arranged for one person by the name of Madhvacharya to steal some of the original manuscripts from Madhvacharya's library. These were some of his most prized books, Sanskrit books, priceless collection of ancient Sanskrit books and writings like that, and they had been stolen. It was with the help of King Jayasimha that these books were actually recovered. King Jayasimha recovered these books and was given an audience with Madhvacharya as a result of his efforts in this regards. Padmatirtha was captured and punished, and Pundaripuri was disgraced by the entire thing. His connection was come to find out, and Jayasimha Raj was able to return the books and get the audience of Madhvacharya. And so Madhvacharya was brought before the king, and the king wanted to arrange for his own court pundit, Trivikram Pandit, to debate with Madhvacharya. Now, Trivikram Pandit was, he wasn't as haughty and arrogant as Pundaripuri or some of the others. So, at any rate, the conversation took place. Trivikram was considered to be the foremost impersonalist Vedantist at the time, and a very expert poet as well. So he would speak his philosophy, but in a very pleasing, poetic way. So they met in the temple under the jurisdiction of King Jayasimha, and the debate continued on in this way. And at the end of the debate, Trivikram was thoroughly defeated. He had not been able to conquer Madhva, but he did not accept that defeat. So again, the following day, conversation took place, and the debate went on, and he was not able to defeat Madhva that day. But he didn't accept that again. For 15 days, the debate went on between the two of them, and each day Madhvacharya soundly defeated Trivikram Pandit, till at the end of the 15 days, Trivikram completely accepted his defeat, having exhausted every argument and all the philosophical presentations he knew. He completely accepted defeat at the hands of Madhvacharya and accepted him as his guru. And after that, Madhvacharya ordered him, because of his expertise and his knowledge and erudite scholarship, he ordered him to write a commentary, and that was known as the Tattva Pradipa. And this was a time that the turning point, this was when these 8 sannyasi disciples came, because one of those 8 was Trivikram, and then he had 7 brothers, his own brother, Trivikram's own brother, and other associates. They all surrendered and became initiated by Madhvacharya, and these became the 8 prominent sannyasis in Madhva's line, who established the 8 particular mats that became known in Madhvacharya's teachings. Trivikram's son, Narayanacharya, is the one that wrote the Madhvacharya. Madhvacharya, Srila Prabhupada mentions that for one that wants to understand truly the life of Madhvacharya, he should read this Madhvacharya because it's written by one of the most prominent disciples, sons of one of the most prominent disciples of Madhvacharya. So in Madhvacharya's final years, he continued very prolifically with his writing. We see sometimes that as a person ages, they kind of diminish in their activities, but Madhvacharya did not. His wit, his intelligence, his understanding of Shastras all continued to sharpen and stay very, very expert in his elder years, and he continued at that time to write. He wrote commentaries on a variety of scriptures. He wrote the Krishnamrita Mahanarva, and a wide variety of others he given. And by this time he was well into his 70s. And he thought to himself, you know, I've completed everything I set out to do in this lifetime. I have written numerous commentaries and Shastras. I've traveled to Badrinath and visited and had the darshan of Vedavyas on 2 occasions. I've traveled and preached in all the different states of India. So he was beginning to, and of course he had established the worship of Udupi Krishna, and the monasteries there with the 8 prominent sannyasis had vast numbers of disciples, and continued, you know, to carry on in this way, and began to think that, you know, maybe this is, I can wrap up my pastimes here. So in establishing this, he turned over to the main preachers in his line, this Padmanabhatirtha and Narharitirtha, the first 2 that he converted back in his original debates, and then Madhvatirtha and Akshobhyatirtha. These were the 4 prominent personalities that took over his philosophical lead. And then he decided his final work would be to write a commentary on the Atreya Upanishad. And upon writing that, it was just on the verge of his 80th birthday. It mentions that he departed from this world and left and returned back to the spiritual world. So it's understood that the teachings of Madhvacharya, if we study these teachings, and if we compare these with the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, particularly in Mahaprabhu's instructions to Rupa and Sanatana Goswamis at Prayag, we'll see that they run very, very expert, and very, very, very similar, very similar. And Baladev Vijayabhushan has compared these 2 and concluded 9 particular points that are prominent in the teachings of Madhvacharya. And he has presented them in a book called the Prameya Ratnavali. This is written by Baladev Vijayabhushan. And I'm going to mention these 9 points in conclusion to this presentation. So Baladev Vijayabhushan has mentioned the following 9 points of Madhvacharya. Number 1, Krishna, who is known as Hari, is the Supreme Lord, the One Absolute. Number 2, that Supreme Lord may be known through the Vedas. Number 3, that the material world is real. Number 4, of course, this is important because the Shankar philosophy says material world is not real. And this is one of the important points of debating. Prabhupada stressed this many times himself. Number 4, that the jivas, or the souls, are different from the Supreme Lord. We're not all the same. And number 5, that the jivas are by nature servants of the Supreme Lord. Number 6, that there are 2 categories of jivas. Those that are liberated and those that are illusioned. Number 7, that liberation means attaining the lotus feet of Krishna. That is, entering into the eternal relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, of course, in the Nectar Devotion, Rupa Goswami and Srila Prabhupada's presentation expand on those 9 types of primary relationships with the Lord. Number 8, pure devotional service is the cause of this relationship with the Supreme Lord. And number 9, that the truth may be known through direct perception, inference, or Vedic authority. These are the 3 means by which one may know the absolute truth. So these 9 points, if one examines them, they are not only represented by Madhvacharya, but they are the same principles that were taught by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, thus completing the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya line by following the teachings of the Acharyas and presenting them in this way. So these are the points that we can find from the life of Madhvacharya. And Madhvacharya, as I mentioned, is a very prominent and important personality in our line. That's why we've chosen to speak about him today. And as this isn't an interactive chat room, we're going to finish there with this presentation. And thank everyone for joining us. And we ask you to tune in again for another chapter in the lives of the Vaishnava Acharyas. Hare Krishna.